On Tuesday, February 2nd, President Biden signed 3 executive orders on immigration. The first one created an interagency task force to reunify families that were separated under the Trump administration's zero tolerance policy. And there is a requirement that an initial report from that task force and recommendation come back to the president within 120 days. The second executive order called for the creation of a regional framework to examine the root causes of migration in the Northern Triangle, to manage the flow of migration throughout the region, and to improve and restore protections for asylum seekers at the southern border. This was a really big order. There's a lot in there, so I'll go through just a few highlights. It requires the development of a strategy to address the root causes of migration and to work collaboratively with other governments in the Northern Triangle to help people resettle as close to their original home as possible when they do feel the need to flee. It calls for a review of refugee resettlement policy in the region, including consideration of reinstating the Central American minors' parole policy and the use of potential discretionary parole authority on a case-by-case basis to admit beneficiaries of family-based immigrant petitions to the United States. It calls for the creation of a humane asylum system that would include a likely rescission of the migrant protection protocols, which is otherwise known as the Remain in Mexico policy, and also a phased strategy for the safe and orderly entry to the US of those who have already been subjected to those protocols. This executive order also revokes a number of other Trump-era executive orders relating to border processing. And it calls on the DHS secretary to consider eliminating the expanded removal policy of the Trump administration. You remember the broadening of that expanded removal policy under Trump. There's an express direction to consider revoking that. It calls for the review of all asylum policies, guidance, and precedential decisions to evaluate whether the United States is in fact providing protections for those fleeing domestic or gang violence that are consistent with international standards. So again, another indication that we could see a pulling back from the Trump administration's interpretation to exclude protection from asylum for victims of domestic violence and gang violence as members of a protected social group. So that was a really big executive order with a lot going on in there, a lot to review and consider, a lot of signaling from the administration about what their forward direction and thinking will be around border processing and asylum seekers. Now, the final executive order is called Restore Faith in Our Legal Immigration System and Promote the Integration of New Americans. That order creates a task force on new Americans through the Domestic Policy Office at the White House, which will work on developing greater collaboration between federal, state, and local governments on welcoming and integrating immigrants into communities. It directs the Secretary of State, Attorney General, and Secretary of Homeland Security to review agency regulations, policies, procedures, and guidance documents, and to make a plan within 90 days to more effectively and efficiently deliver immigration benefits and ensure that agency actions encourage and support full immigrant participation in society. Now that is a huge one because, as we know, there are over 1,000 policy changes under the Trump administration, and a great number of them impact legal immigration. So tweaking and correcting all of the minor policy changes that individually make up the bricks in the invisible wall and having the new administration correct for those is huge. The executive order specifically calls for the review of the final fee rule that was published in August 2020 and of the policies, rules, and procedures governing the public charge provisions of the Immigration Nationality Act. It also requires that the Secretaries of State and Homeland Security and the Attorney General develop a plan to improve accessibility and functioning of the naturalization process and to reduce processing times, as well as to develop a national strategy for promoting naturalization. So there's a big emphasis under that executive order on strengthening and improving and making more efficient and welcoming the legal immigration system in the United States. Well, with so much broken that needs to be fixed and so much that needs to be undone from the last administration, there was, of course, quite a lot missing from those executive orders yesterday. Many immigration advocates, myself included, were disappointed to see that the executive order failed to end the immigrant and non-immigrant visa bans that were implemented by the prior administration. Those are set to expire on their own in March, but they continue to impair legal paths to lawful employment and family reunification every day that they are in effect. So it would have been nice to see the president revoke those harmful bans. Also, the executive orders on Tuesday did not revoke the health insurance proclamation that requires immigrant visa applicants to demonstrate that they will obtain health insurance within 30 days of entering the US. The enforcement of that proclamation is currently enjoined by a federal court, but only for a few more weeks. And this proclamation is also clearly intended to deter and prevent lawful immigration to the US, so revoking it would have been completely consistent with the policy goals stated in the executive order, and it was therefore disappointing to see that the administration declined to take that step right now. The executive order required federal agencies to review the public charge rule, but of course it didn't revoke the public charge rule, since that can't happen by executive order, since it was a federal regulation. But the executive order does mandate a review of all public charge related rules within 60 days, so we can hopefully look forward to the rescission of that rule in the future. I think the principal impact of these executive orders is really to recenter the tone of American immigration policy around encouraging, welcoming, and facilitating immigration to the United States, promoting the fair, humane, and efficient administration of our immigration system, and recognizing the social and economic value that immigrants bring to our country. Truly, the significance of that cannot be overstated in comparison to the completely contrary vision of fear, division, inhumanity, and downright enmity toward immigrants that has held sway over the past 4 years. So that was really huge, just a reset button on tone and direction from the administration. So they're very important in resetting the attitude and the posture of the national government towards immigration. But at the same time, we do have to remember that the damage of the prior administration was not inflicted overnight, and it cannot be undone overnight. And much of what needs to happen to unwind the prior administration's policies and procedures and protocols and just the culture of no that predominated under the Trump administration, that's going to take some time to develop and to implement clearly and correctly. And I think the administration is right to be deliberate and considerate and not to act too hastily or rashly to try to correct the damage of the past and perhaps have the effect of making things worse or of not fully correcting the problem. So one important development yesterday, Tuesday, February 2nd, was the Senate confirmed Alejandro Mayorkas as DHS Secretary. So we are hoping to see more guidance from DHS now on how to implement these policy changes in terms of memos and regulations, now that we have a DHS Secretary in place who has such deep experience in immigration law and policy. So this is an ever evolving and changing landscape for immigration right now, mostly in very new and exciting ways. AILA will continue to track all developments under the new administration, and you can find the latest updates on AILA's featured issue page on the Biden administration's first 100 days.